Welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. This is a show where we aim to educate, inspire and entertain through real life stories and interviews from people in the Scottish property community.
As always, thanks for listening and give us a follow on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember to join us at our monthly networking events on the first Wednesday of every month. Tickets are available on our website. So without further ado, we'll just cut straight into this week's podcast. I'm delighted to welcome to the show Meryn Stewart from Envoy Financial. Welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Great to see you. Now, listeners, I'll set you straight right from the start. We are going to make this an educational for you. Try and bring in a lot of value here from Meryn because she is obviously a qualified mortgage broker and has been doing this for a long time and has got loads of knowledge, and you've kindly gave up an hour of your time here to be here. So we're going to extract a lot of information from you to give the listeners and educate them about mortgages, because quite often I think we overlook the people who are starting out.
Yeah. I think we can almost aim at the more experienced investors where they're in the process of, they know exactly how to use a buy-to-let mortgage and they're scaling up and they're putting them through every other week. That is second nature. But we have to remember that we've got quite a lot of listeners that are starting out and don't really know the basics of obtaining a mortgage.
So a couple of things. We'll start off with the educational stuff, just go back to basics, and then maybe in the second half of the podcast we'll go into the current sort of market, what the trends are, what the interest rates are looking like, what your kind of outlooks are for the market, and what things are still working for your clients. So let's just kick us off. Give us a quick introduction, to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a qualified mortgage broker since 2016, so about 8 years now. Originally started off in a estate agency. They put me through my exams, quickly thought, it's not really for me being in a big corporate estate agency and the way they run things. So moved over to an IFA where I set up their mortgage business, ran that for about 6 years. And then about last year decided to take the leap and go self-employed and do it for myself really. So do all types of mortgages, so residential, buy-to-let. Every day is different in the clients that I come across. But one of my favourite topics probably is buy-to-let and limited company, because it is so different person to person and what strategies they have. So yeah, really excited to get stuck into today's conversation.
Excellent. And obviously at the moment there is a lot of negativity about buy-to-let property investing, but myself and Stephen talk about it regularly, that no matter what the government throw at us, and there's always something new, we still think it's a good investment and we'll still continue to invest in property. And I hope so, because like my business basically hinges on buy-to-let property investing. So hopefully there's not this huge exodus of landlords as they talk about in the news.
And it's a good point that you raised, Nick, as well, because, and I think due to the fact that we're still investing in properties, it's probably mostly down to the fact we can use a buy-to-let mortgage. Where else could we, have a lump of money and buy an asset class where we can leverage someone else's money to buy the asset? If we were investing in cryptocurrency, gold, any other asset class, we'd have to buy 100% of what we were purchasing with a property. We can actually use a buy-to-let mortgage. So
start us off there, Meryn. Like, why would you actually use a mortgage? I mean, I know you do get cash buyers. We get cash buyers coming from abroad and all the rest of it who'll just buy, a 60 grand property in Glasgow with no mortgage. But why would you consider using a mortgage as an investor and landlord?
So it's leveraging up, like you said, spot on. It's using someone else's money really to get you started. I mean, it's few and far between someone's going to have 100 grand to buy something in cash. And if you do have 100 grand, why would you buy the one? You could easily buy 4 with that. Diversify, spread the risk, and use the bank's money rather than your own. Get it working harder for you is what my advice would be with that.
And obviously, if you've got say you did have a client that came to you and they were looking at buying their first investment property, what would be the sort of questions that you'd be asking people, so that people listening to this podcast can sort of, make up their own mind whether they think this is the kind of right steps for them? What would be the kind of main things you'd look at? The
first question that I have with all my clients is, what is the end goal? Why are you wanting to invest in property? And everyone has different reasons for this. So is it to have an additional income stream? So is it cash flow? Is it to have long-term capital appreciation and growth? Maybe you want debt-free asset in retirement. Maybe it's for inheritance for your kids. Whatever the reason, what is the end goal? And I think from there, you can then decide, well, what's the strategy going to be? Whether you then look at personal, limited company, you can then drill right down to repayment, interest. So, there's so many different options, but it all depends on what your immediate goals are and then your long-term goals are.
Great. And surely one of the most common questions must be, how much can I get? So how do people figure that out?
So it's all down to the rental income ultimately. So yes, we do want to see that you've got some form of your own income, so that if there's rental voids, the mortgage lender knows you can keep up your repayments. But really the assessment is all down on the projected rental income that property is going to generate on the market. So if we're looking at a property and you're saying it's potentially going to generate £600-700 a month in rental income, we'll go away and do the stress testing on that and make sure it's got the ICR, so the interest cover ratio, to make sure that that's affordable to get the loan that you're looking for on it.
We're getting technical.
We're
now.
getting very technical.
Nice.
We'll save that for later if you want.
No, it's good. It's good. Obviously, we're just trying to make people understand. So what if you're, I don't know. We do get a lot of young people, listening to the show, early 20s and stuff like that. They might not have a track record of, a good paying salary and stuff like that. Is that necessarily an obstacle for people?
Yes and no. So a lot of lenders will want to see a minimum salary of 25,000. So if you're under that threshold, it can be a little bit trickier, but there's ways around it. We could look at buying with somebody else on the mortgage with you. Not so much a guarantor mortgage, they don't really exist anymore, but there's kind of different ways you can structure it to kind of boost you up to where you need to be for your personal income.
A guarantor mortgage, that was my first mortgage back in 1999
oh
or something
my goodness.
like that.
Jesus, Nick, you're fucking old.
I was at primary school.
Oh
no.
Shown wage, I know, and it worked out pretty well. That was the highest earning.
That was the Inverness one.
That was the Inverness one. I bought just a normal residential mortgage that I never actually lived in, but that's another story. But no, that's obviously really interesting. And does that work differently in terms of personal buy-to-let and limited company, in terms of are they still looking at income, and are lenders like the mainstream lenders for a company buy-to-let, are they still looking to have that minimum income, or is that
not necessarily? No. So if you're going down the limited company route, it depends on who the company directors are. If you're the sole company director and if you're telling me you have zero income, it's probably not going to put you in the best position, if I'm perfectly honest. But if you can say, well, actually, I've got properties already, or I've got rental income coming in, those kind of things can help. If you're in a position where you don't have any income, you're starting out, this is your first buy-to-let, you want to go down the limited company route, it may be worthwhile then having someone else on as a shareholder or a director, even giving them 1%, for example. It doesn't need to be huge, but as long as they're on there and they've got that income, they can put a personal guarantee down for you.
Tell me about the personal guarantee, because that's something that obviously you get called into your solicitor to sign away, and obviously some people might just not know what they're signing for. But essentially, what does that mean?
So it's quite a funny concept, really, because you think with a limited company, it should limit your liability. In essence, that's what a limited company does.
Yeah, because if you had a trading business through a limited company, and you had creditors and your company went bust, then they can't touch your personal assets.
Yes, correct.
But it's different when
it's different
property.
with it. Yes, absolutely. So you need to put a personal guarantee down. But the lender asks this of you because they're aware that in a limited company, that if it did go bust, they wouldn't be able to pursue you. They're aware of that. They don't like that. It's a big risk for them. So they do ask for a personal guarantee to be put down by all the company directors.
How I don't know if this is a question you won't be able to answer it, but
I'll try my best.
I know. I'm just thinking, I'm asking. It came in my mind, so I think I'm going to ask you while we're sitting here. If you had 20 or 30 properties in a limited company and that company went bust, what would be the charging of where they would go for the personal guarantee? Who would get ranking? Because surely it's not worth the paper it's written on at a certain level. Like, as soon as you get, I don't know, maybe 10 buy-to-lets, depending on your personal circumstances, surely it's like, well, it's a worth a spare paper now.
Yeah, where did they draw the line with it, really? Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Fortunately, I've never had a client in that position to find out. I guess once the lender repossesses and they sell everything off, hopefully that's enough to cover what's owed. If not, then I guess what the personal guarantee is for is they will come after you. Yeah.
Fighting over the scraps.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, again, we're talking basic level stuff, and for those people who are looking at just acquiring their first couple of properties, so people are wondering, how does this work in terms of, like, do I have to keep paying it off until it's clear, or what are you finding that people starting out, what kind of terms of mortgages are they getting into? Because obviously we can get repayment mortgages and interest only. Do you want to just explain the differences?
Yeah, absolutely. So your repayment mortgage is probably more seen as the traditional method to pay your mortgage down, really. So every month you're paying off the capital owed as well as interest. So at the end of the mortgage term, there's no balance left and you own that property debt free. With interest only, you're only paying the interest each month. So that initial amount that you've borrowed isn't reducing over time. That's still going to be there and needs to be repaid at the end of the mortgage term. We find a bit of a mix. More often than not, most of our landlords do go for interest only. The reason being is that your monthly payments are going to be lower because you're only paying the interest off. So it means you've got a bigger profit margin each month, higher cash flow, you can reinvest, etc., etc. Don't get me wrong, we will still get the odd landlord that prefers capital repayment. Maybe they're at a position where they've got enough properties in their portfolio and they want to start paying the debt down. They're approaching retirement. Capital repayment all day long, that suits them. But most people that are starting out will go down the interest-only route. Just gives them that flexibility to keep the cash flow up, especially if you're not experienced and you're still kind of figuring out what your kind of income, your outgoings are going to be. Interest-only kind of keeps your costs as low as possible.
I'm assuming the stress test differs quite a bit then between interest-only and repayment. Payment's been higher.
Yes. So with the stress testing, because your payments are lower on interest only, it can be, I don't want to say easier to pass, that's maybe the wrong word to use, but the stress testing isn't maybe as stringent as it would be in capital repayment.
I obviously started out my property investing, it was all interest only, and it still is. But just lately, obviously, with the changes to interest rates and all this, I have kind of like thought to myself, geez, do you know what? Like, see if I'd been paying all that off over the years and I didn't actually need the cash flow because I've got other income. I'm thinking, maybe in another, 10 years or so, I might be in a position where I'd have, like, say, like 4 good quality assets, like, paid off totally, unencumbered, no mortgages and all this. That is now quite appealing with a higher interest rate environment.
Yeah.
Definitely. Rather than having a big portfolio that's all leveraged up to the hills. Not that I have a big portfolio, but there is that kind of...
I always had the rule of thumb that the personal name properties I had on repayment mortgages, and the ones in limited company during acquisitions were interest only, and then I would switch reverse them. But I got that nice little pleasant boost selling off the last couple of properties, the last 6-7 months of my personal name. They've been on interest only, they've been on repayment for the last 8 or 9 years. It was nice to see how low the mortgage went, and you're like, oh, lovely. So you're selling it, you're getting a nice bit of cash back.
Bet it wasn't great when you got your capital gains tax bill in.
One's still coming in on its way through the post.
No dealt with that one yet. I think there's now a rule where you need to pay it within a certain period of time now. 90
days, yeah.
Aye, geez. So going back to the terms of the loan, obviously, so you can obviously, I'm presuming, Meryn, you look at like the whole of the market, do you?
Yes,
to get the best deal for people.
Absolutely.
That's another thing. Like I get people messaging me going, "Oh, I've got a mortgage broker. My mortgage broker's like." Such and such a guy that works for like NatWest or something like that. Right, okay, like maybe you need to go and here, I'll put you forward to somebody independent.
Yeah, broaden your horizons a little bit.
Aye. So that's the first thing, and obviously you're looking for the best rate, the best. How do you gauge? Like how do you recommend the right product to somebody then in terms of like the length of time and the interest rate and all that?
Yeah, so when we're looking at a recommendation for a mortgage, yes, we want to get you the best rate and get you the best deal available, but it has to be right for your circumstances and what your plans are for this property. So there's no point in me saying, yep, I'm going to get you the lowest rate available in the market, but then it's got a big 7% fee on top, or you're then tied in for 5 years, but you actually plan to sell that property. So there's lots of kind of little T's and C's that we need to be aware of. So part of my job is to have a conversation with the client, really understand what their kind of short-term goals and long-term goals are, and then find the right mortgage for them. So whether it's a 2-year fixed, or if they prefer a tracker or something with no tie-in, or whatever it may be. But it's my job to find out what's going to be right for you, but also getting you the best deal as well.
Great. And when somebody comes to you as well, obviously they need to have a clear picture. You're going to ask the questions about what their plan is. What can people do in preparation for that to kind of have to save time and be ready to go? Because at what point people get kind of wrapped up. They've maybe come off a property course or something like that, and they're like, right, I'm going to buy property here. They've looked at the market. They've maybe even put an offer in, but maybe what point do you usually see them? If they come to you after they've got the offer accepted, and then, or what would be the advice to come well in advance?
I would say come well in advance. That would be my top piece of advice, because I see it all too often, like you've just said, they go on a course, they speak to their pals, they've seen it on TikTok, or they go online, they stick an offer in, and then they come to me and go, oh shit, actually.
It's a pub.
Yeah. Non-standard
construction.
Yeah, exactly. Took the words out of my mouth there.
6 red flags.
Yep. Not employed, no income, first time buyer, still living with mum and dad. Yep, seen it all. So my advice is come to a mortgage broker before you start the process of actually sticking offers in, because we want to make sure that we've gone through all the possible outcomes, all the criteria, make sure you tick all the boxes, and then look at the property, make sure the property ticks the boxes as well.
I always say the mortgage broker and accountant now as well. The accountant's crucial to get that set up. To get that right, and limited companies no right for everybody. But I think,
and if a client's coming to you to start with, what documentations would you want them to have up front? Because that can be quite painful starting off asking for X, Y, and Z, and they're missing documents. You're going back and forth, and it just delays that process.
Absolutely, especially when rates are changing so quickly at the moment. If you're faffing about trying to find your last bank statements or your pay slips, and then the rates suddenly pulled, it's a nightmare for me and for you. So ideally, if you can start the process of getting organised as early as possible, the better, depending on what your circumstances are. So if you're employed, generally it's 3 months pay slips. They'll want to see personal bank statements. If you are self-employed, so maybe you've got a trading business, you're a limited company, or you're a sole trader, we would probably want to see your last 2 years tax returns. This part a lot of people kind of fall down with, because they're never up to date with their tax returns. I know the deadline's January the following year kind of thing, so a lot of people wait to the last minute, the night before kind of thing. My advice would be to do it as early as you can to make sure it's organised. Mortgage lenders, they're quite funny with the SE 302s. When you're doing your personal tax return, they can't accept a tax return that's older than 18 months. So if the tax year finishes April 2023, by October the following year, if it's after that, they can't accept that tax return. But then the deadline isn't until January, so there's a kind of grey area of 3 months where you're thinking,
So guess who submits their tax return in January?
So you obviously don't put on.
I can't say I'm surprised.
I know, considering you only get the email notes for this podcast about an hour ago. So like that always gets me, because like when I'm applying, it always makes me get the tax return submitted earlier, because I'm like, like that. But
it's usually around September. I don't think they're they're asking for that year that's already passed.
Absolutely, But then, like you say, a lot of people don't do it till the January, so you've got that kind of grey area of kind of 3-4 months in between of people going, well, I don't need to do it, but I'm going, well, your lender needs it, so you do need to do it. So it's a bit of a battle between me and the accountant sometimes of what's best for the client.
And what can I expect if I'm using you as my broker? What can I expect you to do for me? Like, I know you're going to get me obviously the best situation, the best deal for my circumstances. And then is it just a case of like you do everything after that, or like will you be coming back to me and asking me for more stuff? Or
it's as hands on or as hands off as the client wants it to be, really. Where I find a lot of the value that I add for my landlords, especially portfolio landlords, is I'll help them manage their portfolio over the years. So we'll regularly check in and say, is this working? Are the numbers stacking up? Is it still, getting you to that goal? We're going back to goals again, but is it working for the goals that you want it to be? And when we were speaking earlier about capital repayment versus interest only, you can switch between the two depending on what suits your circumstances over the years. So I think regular check-ins with my landlords definitely adds value to them in getting their portfolio to where they want it to be.
And how do you have a system that schedules like a reminder or an alert when, say, you've taken out a 5-year fixed? Does that then pop up, and then are you contacting the client?
Yes.
Because I feel like sometimes in the past when I've used brokers before, that's often that kind of slips, and then before you know it, you get a letter through from the lender, and
you're on the variable, paying 10%.
Exactly, and I've missed by the time you get it sorted, you're like 3 or 4 months down the line, higher rate.
You surprise me, Nick.
What, that I've not picked up the letter? That I've not opened
You
the letter?
sound like you need a PA. You need an admin.
There's like, see, because I've got because I work from home, I don't operate an office for my letting agency, so all the mail is coming through to my home address.
Oh gosh.
And as we've grown the lettings portfolio, that is like, you're talking about factors fees, council tax bills, you know, everything like landlords are getting stuff redirected to my house. My missus is going absolutely mental.
I wonder, I bet she's cracking up.
She's like,
Full-time job opening.
property. She says, I can't, like, this is not my home. Get an office. Have you got an office, by the way?
We have a central office that we can use, so I work from home predominantly most of the time.
Nice.
Yeah.
But you don't get your mail sent.
No, that goes to the office, thank goodness, and I just go pick it up once a week.
No, she's definitely not happy with that situation. So let's get a wee bit on to actual, current market and what we're seeing at the moment, because obviously, like, you know, things have really turned and changed in the last couple of years. I mean, you presumably you're a mortgage broker back when we saw, you know, record low interest rates and all the rest of it. And did you actually realise when we were going through that time, like, how lucky we were? Or did you just think this was like, because you're still quite young, as you just said, you were still in school when I was getting my first property.
Yeah.
So
Primary school.
So, like, you know,
in primary school, underline.
What age are you, by the way?
29.
Right, okay, so we're almost like a different generation.
Speak for your fucking self.
You're only a couple of years behind me.
Are you millennials? I'm a millennial, just.
No. What?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
I'm not. I'm definitely not a millennial. What comes before millennial?
Gen X.
No, that's after, is it not?
No, it's Gen Z.
I'm on the edge, right? I'm on the edge. You're not.
I'm definitely not a baby boomer.
No.
That's old.
That is old.
Yeah. So I'm like in between. Baby boomers like wartime.
No, because my parents are boomers, I would say.
Right, so you put me in the same sector as your parents. That's really
way to insult the host.
Somebody email me or comment on social media. If I was born 1980, what class does that make?
We'll put it to Instagram today. After this.
Someone Google it.
Just my mind's gone blank. So what were we talking about there?
I'll get back on the mortgages. So a typical client, what would be the process going through? I suppose the process, the time frame, when it gets submitted, what the process is next, you know, when the valuer's been instructed. You know, talk us through a bit
start to finish.
Yeah,
absolutely. So hopefully, ideally, you've come to see me before you've offered on a property. We would run the figures, and if you're looking at a particular property, ideally, I would have those details to go and check that with the lender before you're submitting any offers. So is the rent fitting their affordability? Looking at the home report as well, making sure the property's up to scratch. It's not some crazy construction type, whatever it is. Depending on whether you're going down the route of doing it personal or limited company, you can get a mortgage in principle organised. Limited company, some lenders don't really offer those, so it's a case of just submitting the full application once you've got the property. Offer on the property. Once you've offered on the property, that's when we're actually going to submit your application paperwork for you. So we would ask for your payslips, your ID, your bank statements, etc. Package it all up, send it off to the lender for underwriting. Once the lender's done their initial underwriting, if they're happy with everything, they'll then instruct the valuation. So they'll instruct the surveyor to go out and do that. That might be something you have to pay for. It might be included in the deal for free. We'll have disclosed that up front anyway. So there's no nasty surprises. The valuation itself, timescales, a lot of it's going to depend on the surveyor's availability, how quickly that can happen. But ideally, we would hopefully have it back within a week for you. Underwriting, they'll then have a look at the valuation, make sure they're happy, sign it off, and then issue the mortgage offer. Once the offer's issued, it then moves over to legals. That's the bit that can be a little bit slow. I say a little bit, very slow, depending on what solicitor you use. And I would say this is where finding a good solicitor is key. Yeah. You want someone that's on the ball, that's going to process these things quickly for you, because if you get stuck in legals, weeks and weeks can go by.
Do you advise our clients to avoid the free legals that you get with some lenders? Because we know that it goes to some firms where that's when it drags on and drags on.
Yeah,
and clients
absolutely.
thinking, you're brilliant, I'm saving the
a few £100,
but it drags on for 3 months. You're like, that's why.
Yeah. Especially if a client's looking for something quick. If they're looking for, so say for example, they're coming to the end of their fixed rate. Maybe they're like, Nick, they've left it too late. Suddenly you've got a week to sort it out. We don't want something that's going to drag on forever by sending it to the free legals. So ideally, if the client has their own solicitor lined up and ready, send it to them. Quite often, a lot of the deals do come with cash back, so it kind of covers or offsets your legal fees for you.
While you guys were having a wee gab there, right, I've been looking up generations.
Oh no!
So like, I'm actually Generation X, so born between 1965 and 1980, so I fall into Gen X. Then the millennials start 1981. I've just missed out the millennials. So there you go, I am.
It's the best generation.
Officially
yes.
an old bastard. So there you go.
Depressed Nicks.
Getting back onto it's like the changing market and that, so like
moving swiftly on.
What can I say? I mean, we didn't realise how lucky we were for 10 plus years, and then we had like 15 consecutive Bank of England base rate rises. What's going on now and what you've seen, because like, for example, I was given the example of my own home, for example, which was taken out at a fixed rate of 1.6% for a 5 year, which is coming to an end in May this year. So it's going to jump from like 800 quid up to, I don't know, if we're current, on current rates, what we're going to be like. Could be like 1,200. It could be a £400 jump. Do you know what I mean? Another one of my buy to lets that went from 500 quid up to like 950 or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Ouch.
So these are big jumps.
They're chunky.
How have people been dealing with that? Have you seen any nightmare scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, more so on the residential side, because that's the roof over your head. Buy to lets, worst case scenario, shit hits the fan, you can sell it off and move on and start again somewhere else. But on your own residence, it's a lot more stressful. And I had a client who, she was a nurse and she works every hour under the sun already. I think she's working something like 60 hours, more than 60 hours a week. She's got 2 young kids, single mum, coming up for renewal, and it was going up about £400. And that was a tough phone call. It was awful. And as a broker, there's not an awful lot we can do. I mean, we don't decide the rates.
Yeah. But do you not think people have pushed themselves because it was almost a norm to have rates like that? It's okay, I can afford a 250 grand house. But now when we're going at normal rates back to the 5%, 6%, so it's like, oh shit, this is the reality that I actually can't afford the property I'm living in.
And it's the people who, way back when, were doing 95% loan to value, maxing their term out 35, 40 years, and they were getting the 1.5s or the 1.6s. They're the ones now that are going to be hurt the most, because they've then got their car on finance and they've got this and they've got that. And
they won't get a 35-year mortgage now, a 25 because they're slightly older.
Because they're slightly older, exactly, So they're the people that are probably struggling the most.
Yeah.
If anybody from David Lloyd is listening to this podcast, come May, my notice is going to be handed in to save myself £260 a month, because it's going to go straight to my mortgage.
£260 a month for a gym.
That's nuts. That is
We've talked
nuts.
about this before, mate. I need to join Bannatynes.
Fucking pure gym.
I know. We'll make it work, but it is a sting.
Yeah, and there are things that you can't. So if you are getting your renewal through and suddenly you're looking at the rates and thinking, shit, this isn't manageable, speak to your broker. So even if it's personal or buy-to-let or whatever it is, speak to your broker, because there are things we can do to try and help. So whether that's maybe switching to interest only, extending the term, whatever it is, that there are options. So speak to someone, and I'm sure there's something that we
it's
can
quite a
do.
good point, actually, rather than burying your head in the sand.
Which a lot of people do. Yeah.
And in terms of that's on the kind of residential front, but in terms of the buy-to-let, what's your own kind of outlook, and how have you been seeing things? Have things kind of, has the dust settled a little bit? What's your kind of outlook for the market? Do you have your own? I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you're obviously talking to a lot of other brokers, you're talking to other lenders and stuff like that. Yeah. Where do we see it going this year, 2024?
Optimistic for buy-to-let. I think, we had it so easy for such a long time, and then there was the disaster mini budget, which just sent rates spiralling. Buy-to-let at that time kind of dropped off the face of the earth. It was a really horrible place to be, and I think now landlords are in a position where thinking, well, do you know what, it's probably not going to be changing anytime soon, really. It might come down slightly, but this is maybe the kind of new norm for the short term anyway, so let's just get on with it. So I've certainly seen an uptick in new inquiries coming through. People are wanting to buy again, they're hungry, they're wanting to grow their portfolios, whereas this time last year it was very, very quiet.
What would be a decent limited company at this moment in time? Limited company, what's a decent rate? If I was purchasing something new.
Well, I'm glad you asked. I've got my research.
Very well prepared.
I wrote it down because I've got a memory like a sieve. So for a limited company, let's say 75% loan to value, you're looking to purchase. You are looking at, if you want the best rate possible, the caveat to that, so best rate possible, you're looking at about 3.89%.
Yes.
With a big 7% fee, which is just absolutely nuts. Yeah, arrangement fees.
Let's just talk about arrangement fees while we're on that subject, because not everybody understands that. Again, we're trying to go back to basics. Can you just explain a little bit about the arrangement fee and how that works?
Absolutely. So you'll get lenders who will charge higher interest rates and then they won't have any fees attached. or you'll get lenders that will do lower interest rates, but they will charge a fee. So ultimately, either way, they're making money.
And is this to just make them look good in the market so that it's like a headline grabber, isn't it? Woo, look at them.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I've had clients who are emailing me again 1, 2 in the morning. They're sending it across going, I've seen this rate at 3.79%. How come you're recommending this one at 5 whatever? And I'm going, well, have you read the full details? There's a 7% fee on it. And they go, oh, right.
I always say that as well. If you're fixing a mortgage over a 5-year term, look at the cost that you pay over the 5 years, and you always find it's 20,500, 20,400, all the same, but one's got a 4% arrangement fee and one's got 0, but the payments are vary, but over the 5-year period they're all the same.
And that's added on to the loan, right? So you're not if you're not getting asked to pay that at the purchase of the property.
Well, you could if you wanted to. Don't know why you would. Most people add it on.
Especially 6% AES to pay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the option. So then the danger becomes, obviously, that £100,000 purchase price property now becomes, by the time you add on the 6% ADS plus the £7,000 arrangement fee, that purchase price now becomes, you're talking about 112.
Your loan, if you've got no growth over that fixed period, you're over leveraged by the time you come to refinance
you're
again.
Negative equity almost at that point.
And that's the danger that I think a lot of people need to watch at the moment, where we're in that period where, okay, we've actually just read out in the market update that Scotland's actually performing pretty well in terms of property prices. We're still going up 4%, but if we do hit that downturn, even if we lose 10% value and you've gone down the route of that
7% arrangement fee,
what happens at the end of the term? Is there options? Like what happens? That's a good question. What happens if people find themselves in negative equity now? What are your options at the end of that mortgage term?
To be honest, there's not a lot of options that we can't just wave a magic wand and suddenly get you a really great deal anymore. It doesn't really work that way. You could look at revaluing the property. You could maybe, if you've got other properties, take equity out of those, spread it over and put it into that property.
Could you do a product switch where they wouldn't revalue it? Because surely revaluing it would then highlight the fact that it's then negative, absolutely. So you could stay with your current lender, possibly do a product switch. The lenders will have automated valuations. So when you're doing your product switch, we log onto the system, see what rates they're offering you, and they'll provide a kind of automated valuation, which is just based on inflation, recent market sales, etc., etc. So it depends what the lender's own valuation is, the automated one at that time. You can appeal it and get them to then come out and do a valuation, but then equally that could just go the opposite way. So it's
a little bit risky. So to answer your question, depends on the lender. You could potentially stay and do a product switch.
You just mentioned valuations, so that is one of the ones. So you ask it then, because I always dominate when I...
No, just interesting to see how many of your clients have had valuations getting downvalued or from what their perceived valuation has been undervalued.
Yeah, I would probably say majority of the time it's downvalued at the moment.
So this is when, again, just to explain the basics for the people that are trying to learn this stuff, this is when that you're applying at the point of application to the lender. You're asking the client how much they perceive the valuation to be, or are you helping them with that? Or
the valuation itself, so the property valuation doesn't tend to vary too much, because up in Scotland we've got the home report, so at least we have that as a guide to know what the actual property valuation is. The rental income valuation is a different story, and that's the one that's kind of a little bit more subjective, that can vary, and that's what we're seeing downvalued quite a lot at the moment. When I'm speaking to a client, I'll ask them first of all, what do you think? Why have you chosen this property? What do you think it's going to get on the rental market? If they're using a letting agent, we'll maybe ask their advice, or there's lots of letting agents that I deal with anyway that I'll maybe chat to them, try to get a feel for it, and just kind of do a bit more research and look into it. So as much as we can say yes, we think that property is going to get £600 a month, ultimately when the lender's valuer goes out, it's up to them what they come back with.
And would you challenge it?
I mean, I think I've maybe had 1 or 2 appeals successful in my whole 8 years. They don't accept appeals. What I do with my clients though is I do prepare them for the worst case scenario. So if we say, right, we're going to submit it at £800 a month, see if that works. If it doesn't and it gets downvalued, what the outcomes will be. So if it's 650, 600, 500, what the maximum loan will be based on those amounts.
Do you think it's the lenders being pessimistic on the way the market's going.
Yeah, I think it's the valuers, and I think they've probably been given guidance to be as cautious as possible, because there's been talk of, the bubble's going to burst, the market bubble's going to burst probably for the last 4 years, since COVID, really.
I had a couple of surveyors that I know really well, that I know that their firm was appointed to do the valuations on behalf of the lender, obviously, even though it's my limited company. And when it gets down valid, I'm picking up the phone and asking them, what the fuck? He goes, I didn't put that on it.
Oh,
yeah. He says it's actually that's the bank adjusted it accordingly. So I found
central.
Yes, I found that
powers
quite
above.
Interesting that they're trying to deleverage, which you can take it as you want.
Yeah.
You wonder, actually, we were talking about in the market update about all the government intervention, especially with long-term rent controls as well. You wonder how lenders are going to look on that as well. You know, already, like we talked about, build to rent companies that were due to do big developments in Glasgow and all that pulling out because of all the uncertainty in the Scottish Government legislation and all the rest of it. But you wonder how mortgage lenders, I mean, I know, like, for example, certain areas like Aberdeen, it's harder, isn't it? Because the kind of market uncertainty and the way that things are different from the rest of the country. So I guess they've got internal processes that they're adjusting all the time as well to manage their risk.
It's appetite for risk, really, at the end of the day, isn't it? And I've found, certainly, when you have a property and you're thinking, right, it ticks all the boxes, it fits criteria, what can go wrong, send it in, and then suddenly the valuer comes back and goes, no, not one for us. And you're thinking, what do you mean? I mean, it ticks all the boxes. I don't understand what the problem is. No, just not one for us. And you're thinking,
random.
What? Like,
and
that
you're
doesn't
trying
even
to
make
feed that
sense.
back to the client.
And then you take that back to the client, and they're obviously kicking off thinking, why the fuck not?
Job right,
yeah, exactly.
I've often wondered, actually, because sometimes it just feels like you're knocking your head against a brick wall and trying to move forward, and things are taking so long and all the rest of it. What are the challenges that you face as a broker, like running the business, like dealing with these lenders? What kind of day-to-day problems is there?
Gosh, where do I begin?
Start you off on a rant here.
No, I think that the valuations is probably the biggest issue that we face, and there's a lot of back and forth in that, whether it is that you're trying to appeal it. I mean, if a client wants to appeal, we'll certainly do it for them, but I do kind of say, don't hold your breath, it's probably not going to be accepted. Within that, you've then also got documentation. So I'm finding that lenders are a lot more interested in the person now. So it used to be rental income, ticks the box, fine, affordable, move on, there's your mortgage offer. I'm finding a lot more the lenders are now picking through bank statements. They're asking questions. Where's this income come from? Where's that money come from? Instead of just giving us 1 month, we want 3 months now. You know, they're a lot more interested in what's going on, which isn't ideal for the client, because then you're going back and forth, can you give me another statement? Can you give me another statement?
It's got to be my biggest thing, especially for somebody that I'll get an email and it'll like take me kind of like a few days to reply to it and eventually get the information to you. I'm like, phew, right, that's that one ticked off, and then I get another email. I'm like, another thing, what the hell?
It's like whack-a-mole.
My request to lenders, I know it's not your fault, but why can you not just right from the word go just get everything in the one request?
I do. I mean, I certainly try my best. Lenders will say, they'll have a packaging guideline for us, and they'll say, these are the documents we want, so we send it all in, but it's subject to underwriting, always subject to underwriting. So if they go in and they see in your bank statement you've had a deposit for 10 grand from someone, they're going to want to know where's that 10 grand from, and you go, it's from my savings, right? Well, now we want a statement for your savings account. So they're really going through the paper trail, and it's believe me, it's frustrating for us brokers as well, as much as
do you have to maintain relationships with the BDMs from the main lenders you use then?
Yeah, absolutely. Your BDMs are kind of your saving grace when
What's
things
BDM?
do. Business Development Manager.
Sorry. Good point.
I'm just taking it back again, guys. You watch
Back to
this
basics.
jargon.
Good pull.
Yeah, so your business development manager for each lender, you'll kind of touch base with them every few months. They'll give you an update on what they're seeing, but especially if you have a case that's maybe a little bit out the norm, maybe the property is above commercial, maybe there's something unusual with the client's income, speaking to your BDM and running it past them first to get an idea is a saving grace. So having a good relationship absolutely is important.
Does that help understand what their appetite is? Because I'm assuming that if you're putting through, you've got a go-to lender and you put through 2-bed, 10-minute flats in Glasgow through all the time because they've got an appetite for it, and all of a sudden they give you an example, they're going, nah, don't fancy it, and you're like, what the fuck? Oh, we're really exposing that area.
Yeah.
Is that something that you pay attention to so you can almost preempt it and go, okay, we're not going to go to that lender because I know they're overexposed in these postcodes.
Absolutely. It's kind of just being ahead of the game, really. Yeah. So those meetings with your BDM are really important to pick their brains and say, well, what are you seeing recently and what are you accepting, what are you not accepting? I had a client the other day who was wanting to buy a retirement flat, so the ones that are over 55s kind of thing, and there was a lender. You what, sorry?
Is that for
are you in the market for one,
Nick?
Nick?
Is that for the Generation Z? Sorry. No, the Generation X is... Sorry, Generation Z was later on.
They're younger.
X.
And so he was looking at buying this flat, so I went to the lender, which was Leeds Building Society, because on paper, on their criteria, yes, we can accept retirement properties, no problem at all. But when you speak to the BDM, kind of drill a bit deeper, they're kind of like, well, actually, there's lots of caveats to that, and realistically, that'll get holed up in legals because there's covenants all over the title deeds to that property, age restrictions, if the client defaults and falls behind, if we repossess, we're going to struggle to sell it because of the age restrictions. So realistically, it's probably not going to pass. And you think, well, do you know what? That conversation's just saved me weeks of work potentially.
Forward the client,
absolutely.
That's a really good point.
Talking about BDMs, I get a knockback for a mortgage one time, and it was a stupid thing on my credit file. It was like
what were you buying?
No, it was like a missed utility bill or something like that for like 120 quid or something like that, and the lender knocked it back. This is our bad credit rating, and then like the broker got in touch with me, and then like I found the BDM on LinkedIn. And I was like, any chance, can you have a look at this? And he's like, I actually listen to your podcast. It's brilliant. So he kind of looked into it for me and I managed to get it.
Did you get it through?
Aye.
Oh, brilliant.
I think either the podcast or LinkedIn almost shafted me from a lender. I've only ever been knocked back once, and I think it's because obviously promote what the fuck I do in reality. I'm using other people's money and the buzz is my money, and then it's like, no, he fucking BDMs on LinkedIn. They're looking at going, decline. Why the hell did they get declined? He's like, they're unsure of the source of funds. We've gave the proof. No, you said online that you're fucking not.
Yeah, so the other one that when you were talking about scrutinising bank statements and stuff like that, now you remember a couple of years ago during COVID times where everybody was getting the bounce back loans and stuff like that.
Yes.
Have you had any? Not really, obviously we're not going to talk specifics here, but like, have you had any kind of knockbacks for people where the lenders have been like, what's this 50 grand here that's appeared in your account?
We've had a few chancers. So to kind of give you a bit of context, so you're not allowed to really use a deposit. Your deposit source can't be from the bounce back loan. Effectively, lenders don't like it. And we had a few chancers, trying to move the funds around, maybe 3 or 4 different bank statements to try and like disguise it a little bit for us. But they always find out. They do, and I always just say to clients, like, be honest and upfront. Tell me upfront. There's no point trying to lie to me and say, oh no, that's inheritance, or oh, my pal gave me that money, or whatever.
Because you'll know the lenders that are quite relaxed with the source of the fund, source of deposit.
Yeah, and if we know upfront, then it means I can save us all a whole bunch of time and just put you with the lender that allows it. Yeah,
makes sense.
And what's the latest on a lot of our circle of network? They do things with other people's money, and like private investor. The angel. I think they call it angel investing, where you're using other people's money and not your own to actually buy the property. So, what's the latest with that? And have you had any circumstances where that's kind of?
Yeah, I mean, in general, again, lenders don't typically like that as a source of deposit, especially if this is your first one. If you're an inexperienced landlord, you're just starting out and your deposit is coming from some angel investor that's graced you with, 40 grand. The lenders don't like that because they want to see that you've got this money from your own sources. So whether that's been maybe a gift from family, I don't know, that's absolutely fine. But from an investor that you have no relation to, that you owe that money back to, it is a bit of a no-no for most lenders. There will be lenders that will do it, but you're then maybe paying a higher rate.
So what's the way around that one then, Stephen?
I'll keep that off the podcast.
Is that
there's a will, there's a way.
Is that what I'm paying my £97 for when I come to my weekend workshop? Secrets. Right, I think that was a great chat. We're going to wrap up now. Meryn, is there anything else you want to ask, and any last sort of parting words of advice for people? Get yourself a decent mortgage broker.
Yeah, get yourself a decent, but use your broker as well. You know,
Yeah.
speak to them, be honest, disclose everything up front. Speak to your brokers early in the process as possible. So before you're placing offers, that's when you should engage and have the discussions with them, and review your portfolio regularly as well. Don't just, you know, think, right, I'm on a 2-year fixed rate, let's just shove it away for 2 years. Keep an eye on it and see how it's performing. And, you know, about 6 months before the rate's due to end, that's when you should be getting in touch with your broker to review it. Give yourself plenty of time and not the night before.
It's good advice. Good
Yes.
advice.
And give yourself a wee plug.
Yeah, sorry. Where can people reach out to?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us at envoyfinancial.co.uk, but I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the socials. Basically, that's where you can get me.
Great stuff. Well, we'll share your links and all that in the show notes. And thanks for taking the time to come speak to us
Thanks
today
for
and
having
educate
me.
our
Yes.
listeners.
It's been fun.
Thanks, Meryn.